Is President Trump's reelection worth $2 trillion to the country? I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. I'm with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. And gentlemen, the stimulus bill that's been in negotiations for a number of weeks now between the White House's emissary, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and House Speaker Democrat Nancy Pelosi continue. Even though there hasn't been a breakthrough, they feel that these negotiations are good enough to carry on. We're talking about a sum in the neighborhood of $2 trillion. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has said if the House sends him a bill, he will bring that bill to a vote on the Senate floor. But behind the scenes, we're now hearing, according to the New York Times, that he has told Republican senators that he is counseling the White House to not push for approval of this stimulus package before the election. He believes that they are overspending and that it is not going to help Republicans with fiscally conservative voters. Stephen Green, this is an interesting challenge because a lot of people are saying, the president has mishandled the whole coronavirus pandemic and could have nipped it in the bud much earlier than he did. His critics have been very harsh about his handling of this. Here's an opportunity that the president has grabbed onto to push the idea of sending checks out to the American public with his signature on them before the election. And yet Mitch McConnell seems to be pushing back. Do you think Senate Republicans are trying to do something that gives them a little distance between themselves and the president, concerned that his unpopularity may hamper their election prospects on November 3rd?
Well, I'm going to dispute a couple of notions. One is the president's unpopularity. If you look beyond the headline polls, I think he's doing just fine. I wrote a column on this earlier for PJ Media. You get into the nitty gritty stuff, and he's looking pretty good going into Tuesday, November 3rd. The other thing is, which one of his advisors, coronavirus advisors, wasn't Fauci, the other one, who said that thank you, if we do things almost perfectly, 200,000 people are still going to die from this thing. So I guess Trump has done things almost perfectly. That was back in March. It's turned out to be a pretty solid prediction. It's a nasty bug. It's a nasty pandemic. We're just so lucky that it's not anything like the Spanish flu of 1918, and that it's a very picky eater. This one is, I think, Bill coined that awesome phrase. That said, I suspect there are a lot of poison pills in Nancy Pelosi's bill. The original one was over $2 trillion, and it was basically alms for us, $1,200. It's just, as my friend Stephen Cruiser noted, that's a week's worth of sandwiches in Los Angeles, where he used to live. But it had huge bailout provisions for these poorly run blue cities and blue states that really need to face the music. And this was the original bill was going to allow them to not face the music and keep on running things in their terrible, awful ways. That can't continue. So I suspect some of those poison pills are still in there. Also, we need to stop calling this a stimulus bill. It's not. Fundamentally, the economy is sound. What this is, and what the first one was, is a takings bill. The government took from us. They shut down the economy. They ordered us out of our businesses and into our homes, and that is a takings under the Constitution, and the government can't do that without paying us back for it. And we're getting pennies on the dollar, absolute pennies on the dollar. Either push through something that actually makes a damn difference without bailing out these poorly managed blue states and blue cities, or just reopen the damn economy and let us get back to work, because you will see a V-shaped recovery like you've never seen before.
Bill Whittle, it occurs to me that a lot of people with conservative principles around the country may have had tough struggles in the past several months with their jobs being cut or cut back and having a difficult time making ends meet. What happens to conservative principles like fiscal conservatism when this kind of challenge faces you? And do you really think that there are Republicans who would agree with Mitch McConnell and say, no, I don't want you to send me that $1,200 check. You should be much more fiscally prudent before this election. And if you do send me that $1,200 check, I'm going to punish the Republican Party at the polls.
Well, if the story is true, I think Mitch McConnell has made a very serious miscalculation for a number of reasons. First of all, if he's really thinking that Donald Trump shouldn't sign this bill to improve his reelection, chances. That's just nuts. Nancy Pelosi is blocking the bill because she does not want the American people to get a check with Donald Trump's name on it, giving them some relief for this lockdown that has been caused by Democratic politicians. That'd be the worst thing in the world for her to suddenly have checks for $2,000 or whatever arrive for every American as a result of what the government did to them. I agree with Steve 100%. And people say, well, you can't make the hypocrisy case on this one. This isn't a question of just spending on things. Steve's exactly right. This is almost a form of reparations for what the government has done to us against our will. And it has deprived us of this money. And Steve's point about pennies on the dollar is another excellent point. I don't know how many trillions of dollars of wealth have been lost in this year in this country, but it's a lot more than two. The real problem here, in my opinion, is this. It is a particularly egregious example of it, but it's a problem that we should have been addressing a long time ago. And that's this idea of burying riders in bills. It's simply immoral. And the thing that amazes me, frankly, is that we still seem to be unable to find somebody, and Mitch McConnell would be a fine candidate for this, to instead of be talking about the amount of money that's being spent, it's $500 billion and we should be what Mitch McConnell should be doing is he should be speaking to the press on a daily basis saying this bill is not passing because Nancy Pelosi has included money for, at least for the time, for the National Public Television and for the Kennedy Center and for bailing out all these states. This money needs to go to the American people who've been hurt by this. And he should say that every single day. And he should make Nancy Pelosi defend the bill, not on the basis of how much money it is, but on the basis of why are you including all of these other things? And why are you holding up a bill that Americans desperately need as a result of government crackdowns? Illegal government crackdowns. They desperately need this money to feed their families, Nancy. And why are you holding this back? So that you can fund Planned Parenthood. Don't you think this is a little more important than that? I don't understand the inability sometimes of Republican leaders to get to the heart of the matter and stay there. But to be quibbling about, well, 500 billion would be an acceptable expenditure, but 1 trillion wouldn't be. That would be just wrong. If for nothing else, it is a gross, enormous error in terms of reading the politics of the country. Donald Trump be much better served if this bill could be passed before the election occurs.
The amazing thing is that neither of the arguments that you just heard are being made by the Trump administration or by Mitch McConnell. Or if they are being made, they're not making it into the newspapers, onto the TV stations. There's no, eminent domain takings clause discussion that I've heard so far. There's a very little discussion about the allocation of the funds of the so-called stimulus bill. And these are just not really public domain discussions. You've got the president on the one side pushing for it and saying, I'll sign it. Steve Mnuchin, his guy, is in there fighting for it. Nancy Pelosi is saying that the Republicans are restraining us from giving the kind of relief that we really need to give by trying to negotiate a smaller bill. And then you've got Mitch McConnell. What to make of Mitch McConnell, the guy who publicly says, I will bring this thing to a vote if the House sends us a bill, which is lukewarm at best. It's not an endorsement of the bill. It's just saying he'll let it onto the floor. At the same time, when he's telling Republican colleagues behind the scenes that he has been cautioning the White House to not bring this bill, to restrain this bill from showing up, especially before the election. And McConnell says to his Republican colleagues that he's pretty sure that this information that he's sharing right now will leak out to the press. I think that, there are often accusations that there are politicians who are so brilliant that they're playing three-dimensional chess. I think that Mitch McConnell really is the only guy I've ever heard of who really does seem to be playing three-dimensional chess. What he's actually trying to accomplish is not clear. It looks like he's trying to buy a little distance from the president and basically giving some of his members that are in hard-fought races in places that lean Democrat or moderate Republican, give them a little chance to express their desire to be fiscally prudent. He's also, I think, sending a signal to the White House that says, I'm still in charge here. The President Trump hasn't steamrolled the entire Republican Party. But I can't see this bill not coming through before the election. The incentive to hand over a bunch of cash to the American voters from both parties, frankly, is too strong. But the reality of it is they're not giving us anything. They're fronting it to us. They're making a loan. These are royalties paid in advance that we will have to pay back from sales in arrears. And that is what we should all contemplate as we go into this. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, I could use that $1,200 right now. Oh, yes, I could. But do you really want it when the consequences are that you will be paying it back with interest over many years, and your children will, and your grandchildren will? It's a conversation the conservatives used to have all the time, which we don't hear much of these days. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.